cloud FinOps and governance. Today, we will actually look at the key strategies on how to actually manage your cloud costs and the importance of cloud governance and collaboration, right? And of course, to make it all exciting, we will have a panel discussion with our guests, drawing perspective from their experience. I think during this whole webinar, all of you will be in mute, except for the panelists. There will be time for question and answer session at the end. So I would request all of you to please drop your queries in the Q&A window. And during the later session or the later part of the day or the session, we'll sort of go through some of these queries and try and answer as much as possible. So before I get started, I would like to introduce the team at the site today. We have Shanmuka Polapedi, who is my colleague MD, leading the cloud and infrastructure practice at Protiviti. We have Phoebe Zhang. Thanks, Phoebe, for joining, who is actually our platform lead at Aptio and IBM. I have Abhinav Jaiswal, who is the group IT audit lead with the Adani Group. Thanks, Abhinavji, for joining. Ritvik Gogoi, who is our cloud architect and our FinOps lead at Protiviti. Vanshita, who is helping us coordinate this whole webinar for us. And I am Prasad Nair, MD for Cloud and Infrastructure at Protiviti. So that was a team introduction. So we'll get started with the session for today. Just to set the context, right? I mean, what FinOps is all about, right? I mean, I'll not get into the details because all of you know what really cloud FinOps is. Just to set the context, the cloud spending, if you see we are sort of estimating around 1.35 trillion of cloud spend by 2027. And as per the current statistics, the current trends, it's envisaged almost 30% of that investment would be actually overspent. This is actually waste going down, right? Without using those, without the real usage of cloud, this is actually the waste that would going to happen. Now, given the current market dynamics, your enterprises are looking at everything possible, right? External and internal factors which will help them improve profitability. While on one side, they're looking at turnover, the other factor, of course, is how do I increase profitability? And 30% of wastage is a very good, is a decent amount, right? It's a big amount. So as organizations scale their whole cloud adoption, whether it's we speak of broader digital transformation or migrating legacy systems into more modern apps, imbibing new technologies, where of course cloud has got a very large play. There is a sense of urgency, right? Giving these numbers, if you see 30% of overspending, there is an urgency to bring structure, visibility, and efficiency to this whole cloud spending. And this has become more pressing than ever, right? Because earlier, if you see the early stages, sorry, was there sorry for the faux pas. I think there was some audio gap I had. So this has become more pressing than ever, right? In terms of how do we control this cloud, the cost. So for organizations to shift from a reactive cloud cost assessment and cleanup and to move to a very proactive, automated way of managing this whole FinOps, right? The whole your cloud management. It is not just about a tool or people, right? It's a combination of tool, it's a combination of skill, it's a combination of the culture, right? The entire organization culture also have to come up, right? So a proper FinOps framework needs to be defined. And in this very rapidly evolving landscape, cloud FinOps will actually play a very effective role in optimizing your cloud investments. And if you always see, right, wherever we think about cloud cost, it has always been seen as a CIO focus area, right? It is an IT problem. But the way, and if you really see, cloud is not just IT, right? Because cloud basically it is pervasive everywhere. It is essentially to add business value, right? So it is not just a CIO problem. It's actually going to be your CIO, CFO, the business teams, along with IT are very important stakeholders to ensure the value of your cloud investment, right? So that was just the icebreaker to just sort of get our webinar started. Dear participants, what I would like you everyone to take a quick poll with the top 3 challenges that you believe your organization is facing today in terms of cloud cost management, right? This can be maybe a challenge that you already have or something that you perceive to be. It'll be very helpful for us to sort of understand, right, how you guys see this. We have 30 seconds for the poll and before we get to the next slide. Request all the attendees, if you can sort of make this selection, it just help us set a context for the next set of discussions. It doesn't have to be right or wrong. I think Vanshita, we can go ahead. Probably, I'm not sure whether we sort of done with 30 seconds.
All right.
Shall we close the poll?
Yeah.
At least I don't see any results, so I'm assuming there are no responses yet.
Yeah, Prasad, looks like I do not see any responses either. So no answer is the.
No answer, no answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, till now, no answer. So that's fine. I think I mean let's move on. Let's move on. If you can actually, Vanshita, help us, please take off the. Because I'm still seeing the poll window.
Okay. Maybe you can pull it down.
I've taken it off. I have taken
Yeah.
it off.
Yeah.
So if you look at the the diverse perspectives, right, coming from the market. So we were just sort of as part of our research, when we looked at broader challenges, right? If you look at our broad challenges that customers are facing, these are essentially the broad areas where, let me sort of get this up again, pardon for the FAPA. So if you see, these are, the major broadly the issues that clients have come up with, right? Saying that, hey, when I have a multi-cloud setup, in terms of whether it is skills to understand which CLI, which API, where do I get the right metric, and how do I basically collate all of that into a single place for me to run those metrics and monitor, right? So multi-cloud is a big problem. Cross team and cross function alignment, right? When you say cross team, there is a project team and all of these teams have various objectives, right? A project teams wants to deliver the project as early as possible. They are looking at the business requirements. There is an operations team which wants to make sure the operation, whatever is getting into the environment, is all controlled, safe, change management done properly, so on. There is a DevOps team which is looking at how do I control all the code, how do I make sure that it is very well tested and all of that, right? And of course there's risk, there's architecture board. So every team has its own perspective. Now each thoughts in terms of how the solution should be can have an impact on cost, right? So hence the reason of a collaboration, right? How do we collaborate to make sure that all views are getting into it at the same time? There are no leakages that would happen in that decision making. Similarly, a complex cost allocation, large enterprises running, let's say, multiple COEs, shared services, multiple subsidiaries, and when you have a combinations of systems, which is SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, right, and you're doing all of that, how do I ensure that I'm able to tag the resources, charge it back to appropriately to the right teams and so on? That's a complex issue. One of the major challenges that we have heard from is, the entire planning itself was wrong. So when organizations have started the client cloud journey, there was an initial planning done that, hey, cloud would, if you take this particular provider, or if you use this kind of services, this would be cheaper for you, right? But as they start implementing the solution, they figure out that, hey, the choice of service was not right. Probably they had to look at some other service and so on, or some of the critical components like a DR, etc., was actually missed out. So your entire baselining itself is incorrect, right? So these were some of the challenges which sort of came up. And if you really look at some of the qualitative aspects, right, of this of the challenges. See, look at this: 26% of wastage today were essentially due to pilot projects and developer activities, right? And 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 that's natural to cloud, right? The moment you set up, you spin up, you do POCs, pilots, etc. That's one area that people have been spending a lot. Shifting priorities, right? You would have started with some legacy systems, but then you want to get into new areas, new innovations, which again sort of shifts priorities and sort of increase your costs, right? So these are broadly challenges. I am, I assume that some of you would be sort of going through similar challenges. Now, what is required, right? So, as I mentioned before, to have a very effective FinOps framework, collaboration is key, right? And everyone in the organization is responsible, because cloud is not just an IT or a business problem. It's because everybody is using that. So mindset change is required in terms of looking at FinOps not as a cost reduction exercise, right? Typically, when we think of FinOps, the objective is, hey, how do I reduce cost, right? The mindset should not be to reduce cost. The mindset should be to, how do I maximize my value out of that cloud investment? So it's not just about reducing the dollars, but to ensure that the dollars that I'm spending, is it bringing that equal amount of business value to the enterprise? And of course, yeah, when you do this, there will be, right? When you set up a FinOps framework, there will be policy restrictions, there will be additional operational cadences required. There will be guardrails which will restrict the agility and the volatility that you typically associate with cloud. Right? We all know, right? The moment somebody says cloud, you can spin up a resource, set up a new account, do a POC, which is very easy, and that is the beauty of cloud. But then it is very important to make sure that all of these pilots or the pseudo projects that you would run, are you actually how are you financially monitoring that and controlling it to make sure that the money is used prudently? And balance is a key, right? If you look at it, balance is the key. While you look at the agility that cloud offers, we want to make sure we don't stifle innovation. We are basically able to meet the business change needs, broader enterprise transformation needs. We should be able to respond to that as early as possible. But at the same time, as a firm, we have to ensure that in all these initiatives are financially measured and aligned to the value that is expected to drive. This will make your entire decision making more easier and also very objective driven, right? Because if you have everything, it's all tracked, it's just easy for everybody to make that decision. Going back to the first slide of the presentation, if you remember, we said, hey, FinOps is not just one aspect or a one-off activity, right? It needs to be done across the life cycle. So starting with strategy, right? So if you look at strategy, and this is where I said, right, the moment you are thinking about cloud, what application should I migrate to cloud? What should be my strategy of migration? Should it just be a lift and shift? Should I basically do some plumbing to the architecture, what we typically call as re-architect or re-platform, right? Modernize that application. And also, what CSP should I be looking at, right? Very important, because that would be your baseline for your financial working and the ROI. If this is wrong, your entire cycle will be wrong, right? Of course, there will be some variances, but it cannot be completely wrong, right? So very important, right? So some of these cost levers can be sort of handled here during the strategy phase. During your projects, when you're doing projects go through scope changes, projects go through change in design. There will be new features that you would add, right? Because as business, you want new features also to be included in today's volatile age. It is very important to validate those decisions. So what are you changing and how does it go back and impact your financial baselines that you would have created, right? So once you do that, it is very easy then to make, everybody in the organization, you are making this whole thing transparent to say, hey, these are the new features and values that we have added to the solution, due to which there is an increase in cost. But hey, this essentially, end of the day, this is the ROI for that spend that you would do, right? And of course, the last stage, I think, the whole governance, right? This is where the key is cloud operations, because once solutions are live, continuous changes, incidents, uh, compliances, regulatory issues, you will keep on changing this environment. Same logic, right? The moment that there's anything change, how do you basically trace it back to say your strategy and align each of these items to say these are the changes that has been brought into the systems which will lead to a financial impact, and that we should be made visible to everybody in the organization, right? So the whole balance of what you spend versus what you're getting out of it. For example, if you're talking about compliance, you cannot, compliance is essential. You cannot cut corners to make sure that, hey, let me cut corners so that tomorrow cyber risk can happen, right? You cannot do that. So that's the balance that we're talking about. And all of this, end of the day, should be monitored, tracked very closely so that it is aligning back to the business case. Right. So with this, I will now request my colleague Shanmuka to take us through the importance of cloud governance in a FinOps scenario, and again some perspectives on his side on how do we manage this. So over to you, Shanmuka.
Thanks, Prasad. Thanks for setting up the context as well, as to how governance is going to play an important role. So the perspective that I want to present to the team is consider governance as the foundation, and the FinOps layer is an execution layer. I'd like to actually view this one as a very simple day in a life example, right? So if you were to really think about your personal experiences of, let's say, you are trying to optimize the cost of the TV and entertainment on the OTT platforms, right? The way you can think about it is, hey, your goal is to optimize the cost that you are going to incur on the entertainment using TV, whether it is a cable or multiple OTT apps that you are trying to subscribe to, or the channels that you would want to use, and so on. So probably you are spending like 3,000, let's say, let's make an assumption of 3,000 per year, and you would want to optimize it, right? So what do? You would want to actually look at, hey, what are all the options exist? What kind of entertainment channels that you would want to pick and choose? What are the offers that are available? So you're kind of thinking about how much you would want to spend, which of the channels that you would want to select, and so on, right? And then as you subscribe over a year, you would actually evaluate how much of those subscribed apps or OTT channels that you have started to use or view as well, and then you try to optimize at the end of the year, right? So the way I think about governance, or I think about any optimization over a period of time, which is what the FinOps is trying to achieve for us as an organization, is, hey, first, before we try to optimize, set the guidelines and the guardrails and the foundations, right? That's what governance is going to help us. When we refer to the guardrails or the governance frameworks that we set up for cloud consumption, we need to think about, hey, what are the kind of policies and guardrails that we set? And this could be as simple as, hey, we don't want to actually give we set a policy of not using GPUs until and unless there is a pure business case. That's a policy that is set, which means that it has an implication on other policies like, hey, you don't want to give access to anyone in the organization to spin up a GPU, and you have restricted access and identity controls that are all set as part of the governance framework. And then as you spin up those resources, you would want to understand who is spinning up those resources, how it is being costed, what is the consumption, what is the pattern of usage of those resources on the cloud, and so on, which is where the tagging and the standards will come into play. This is all being set up upfront, right? Not after the fact of consuming or in the process of consumption, but we decide all of these budgetary controls and what are the services that we would want to use on the cloud upfront, and which is what is the foundation being set up by cloud governance. But as we start to spin up and use services on the cloud, what we would want to do is make sure that whatever is the costing and the chargeback that we are looking at, we have a good traceability, and the FinOps is going to actually help us understand who is consuming are we using the right resources and right sizing for, and the recommendations, are we using the right recommendations from the cloud service providers for the different kind of resources and services that they offer, because it's kind of an open-ended capability that exists on the cloud. We would want to use what is required and when they are required. And these are the kind of services that can be enabled through FinOps. We'd also want to see if, from a perspective of, are we using the right, for the lack of a better word, commitment or discounts that the cloud service providers are using, the saving plans, or so we would want to see that whatever offers, like in our example of OTT, if there are offers, we would want to use it. Similarly, the commitment management, from a FinOps standpoint, we would want to see what are all the different discounts and other capabilities that the cloud service provider is providing at any point in time, and using or taking advantage of those discounts and so on. You would want to definitely make sure that there is enough anomaly detection capability set up as part of the policy definitions. So, for example, if you suddenly start to see huge consumption of storage, you'd want to identify that anomaly and make sure that the consumption of the storage, or the active storage versus cold storage usage and so on, you would want to see what's happening in the environment. And at the end of the day, cloud FinOps, as it is for the value of the business, it can be only enabled by the cloud governance. So to end it, I would want to live with the thought of, hey, we cannot achieve FinOps without cloud governance. And cloud governance becomes the basis for achieving our any optimization journey or the cloud adoption journey for us as consumers of the cloud in this space. Yeah. So back to you, Prasad.
Thanks, Shanmugha. Thank you so much. So team, while I think it's time for another poll, and then just pardon me, I'm just trying to get the mouse cursor on. Yes, I think the poll should be up. Sorry for the slight lag, but participants, this is actually your second poll.
All we are asking is for to understand
yeah.
your priorities, top 3 priorities. You don't need to select in any order.
Yeah, the poll time's up, but probably we'll I could still see the figures changing. So we'll probably keep it for another 3 seconds before we just take a summary. So counting back, 3, 2, 1. Yes, Vanchita, if you can just close the poll. Can we just look at a percentage? Is it possible to just see a percentage in terms of what seems to be just interested to see what would be the top priorities that...
The results are up.
Great. So I see, I think cloud governance and policy refresh, I see that as one of the important one. Absolutely right. Investing in tools and platform. Yes, absolutely. And building of reporting and governance, right? So yeah, so I think even if you see within this, right? So broadly, if you see the picture is very clearly, we are talking about governance, right? So we are talking about how do we put better controls in place? How do we actually report the cost? And how do we govern, right? And this essentially, if you look at the challenges that folks were talking about earlier when we did the research, very similar finding, right? So I think there are no outliers here, so we are not digressing. I think more or less seems to be the flavor of the of the industry. Great. So moving on, I think after this poll, I think we'll get to our interesting session here, and I will request our esteemed panels, Phoebe and Abhinav, to be on the spotlight.
Thank you, Prasad.
So once again, Abhinav, Phoebe, thanks for joining. I know, Phoebe, you're in Singapore, so probably it's late for you, but thank you for being here. So starting with you, Abhinav, I mean, you're with the audit team, right? So I'm sure everybody would be intrigued, right? What has audit got to do with cloud FinOps, right? We spoke of CFO, CIO, and IT. I mean, the business team and so on. What's your view as an audit SME? How do you see, audit function to add value to when we say, cloud governance or in a policy making decision?
Yeah, Prasad. So what I would say is that audit is one of the functions which has 360-degree visibility to the organization. So one approach is you try it as a consulting assignment and start with something where somebody recommends something. But prior to recommendation, you have to find the problems. And audit being known to a lot of people where they already have stakeholders known to them, and cost is one of the key areas of audit teams. So, and then with the experts available as chartered accountant, chartered financial analysts, and a lot of these finance professionals. So I think audit can make an integrated team and then can look into the problems holistically. Obviously, the need for the support of technical team would be required. But then with already having a connect with the finance team, all the cross-cultural teams, and then with the IT team, and then others like account payable, account receivable, everyone is known to the audit function. So that helps them to bring that connect and put it in the form of audit-based approach, not with the perspective of fault finding, but then finding out opportunities where you can, leverage your presence and then obviously you can shed some light on the things where organization can improve.
Thanks for that, Abhinav. Just a follow up to that, right? I mean, any instances, right, when you have been involved in your experience that you were able to unearth which was earlier not visible to the organization, right? I mean, so any instance here just for our learning as well.
There were many cases, I would say. So I think last 2 years we have invested a lot into finding the cost leakage, not only for the cloud perspective, but from any other way where we can save cost and anything which is saved as a cost is added to your margins or profit. So we have done a lot of audits around this area from the IT cost perspective and cloud cost perspective. And we found when we deep dived, we looked into the cases where we see where was the leakage happening, where and we got into a lot of surprises also that we assumed that people were aware, people were known to how the leakage is happening. But unfortunately, we found that people in most of the cases were aligned with their goal, which was to develop a good product and with no fault of their own, because they were very much aligned and very much focused, very much towards into how they can deliver it out. But a little bit of discipline and knowledge, I would say, discipline and knowledge. It turned out at a later stage in the hindsight that if they have been informed in advance and educated a little, they could have saved a lot of cost. But nevertheless, you have lesson learned, and then you establish policies and procedures, and then as you also mentioned, there's a word which is balance and value driving. So we have to make sure that even their heart is not broken, their dream project is completed, but then the places where you could have saved the cost is also known. So you burn your fingers, but then you learn. So that's the way I see it.
No, I think very, very well said, Abhinavji. I think, and you are very right? Because when teams start working, then they are very much focused on that problem on hand, right? So some of these sort of get up, and I think that is where I think audit as a function can round it off, right, across all. I think thanks for that. So over to you, Phoebe, for you, right? I mean, and you heard Abhinav talking about this. So I know since you are from a leading, from a leading company which is sort of on the FinOps, leading products on the FinOps side. How do you see, right? Because as I said, there will be stakeholders. It is not just technology stakeholders. There will be diverse needs of CFOs, CIOs, audit teams in terms of what they see from a metrics. How do you see this whole FinOps products will evolve, to cater to these kind of stakeholders?
Thank you for the question. It's actually a very big question. If you look at the market, or if you look at a large organization now, all of them is practicing FinOps to a certain point with different tools and practice. So let me start with the most traditional tool. Actually, you can consider Excel as the one of the FinOps tool because it brings data together and you can, generate a dashboard and do certain allocation for you, cost visibility for you, which is one of the FinOps objective. But this is definitely not going to handle well in the complex cases. So some organizations turn to leverage on the native tools from the Azure, AWS, and so on. But they still have a pretty unique problem is that it benefits IT pretty well, but when it comes to BU and finance, they are not comfortable navigating on a technical dashboard. So that's why there are third-party, let's say, specific FinOps tools coming in, let's say Cloudability, Cloud Health, Flexera, and so on, right? So this is now the landscape of the FinOps tool. And how it's going to evolve, or how does it address the pain point in the market right now is, first thing, to make it personalized and more, say, approachable, other than like an Excel sheet, you don't know where to start, or you're too scared to touch. To a dashboard, you don't know where to navigate because it's too technical. To the point that you need a tool that is fix the requirement for everybody because it grants the full level of granularity from the top level, the big numbers, up to the cost visibility, up to the actionable insights like right sizing recommendations and so on. And it is easy to read, like the finance, the business people are comfortable coming in to work around, touch it, play with it. So it fits the requirement for everybody.
I think thanks for that feedback. So I think you made a very valid point, right? Actionable insights, because I think that is important, because at each levels, as long as you see what is that I need to do as an action, and the metrics that I am interested, I think that, I think sits very well. So in your experience, Phoebe, what are some of the any common mistakes that you want to just call out when clients typically start with the FinOps journey? And do you think some of these tools can help avoid those mistakes? I mean, from an adoption perspective, right?
Yeah.
As you said, Excel, then it's a long window, right?
Yes, it's a long journey. Yeah, this is a very common thing that we see with the organization. So as a FinOps to SME, I do hear a lot of story, actually lessons learned. I would say starting from the most generic, most common one, that I think majority of the organization, because they sort of starting the FinOps practice without realizing that, starting with Excel or dashboard, they think FinOps is a cost-cutting activity or it's a one-time activity. You only need to do it once a month, or you need to do it once in every year, and that's about it. So it's a very traditional budgeting, finance, corporate finance kind of mindset, right? So if you're applying this kind of mindset into the cloud operation, things are very different, because first thing is the new resource that keeps spinning every day. That's one. You cannot really cut saying that you can only spin up resources first day of the month. It doesn't work in a finance way like this. And the second thing is you can't really have full control to existing resources because it scales up and down. That's the whole point of cloud. So these kind of things, because sometimes the finance or the BU didn't really realize from the traditional point of view. So they sometimes miss out the actual requirement on continuous evaluation and continuous improvement, right? So this is the most common, let's say, mistakes or the missing white space, the blind spots that we see with the, I won't say it's a mistake, it's more like a blind spot with the organizations in is seeking for a FinOps tool. And the second, let's say, mistake or blind spot that we see is they expect a magic tool to do everything for them. Let's say come to FinOps, you buy a FinOps tool and they just bring the data in, like, wow, everything is out. It doesn't really work that way because it's shared responsibility. For example, that's the most common example is the tagging on the cloud side is not properly done or it's not there at all, but they expect to do that in the FinOps tool. But they need to realize that they need to build a foundation, or in the cloud space, we always say, like SaaS space, we always say shared responsibility. So their cloud team need to do certain things to build the foundation so that we can build the rest of the practice or to feed the rest of their priorities, resolving their issues on with the FinOps tool, right? And the last point I want to make is that it is, as both of you has mentioned already, and I want to enforce this point, that FinOps is not only an IT practice. It's a practice and a culture that need to be pushed top down and to involve people in the very beginning from the different department, let's say finance, key BUs, IT definitely, or even let's say the operations team, because they are the potential users of this tool, and they were gonna practice in this FinOps operation every day. All right, so that's a long answer, and I hope it clarifies and give you some insights.
No, absolutely. Good insight, right? And it absolutely segues into what Shanmukha was mentioning, right? It was, the initial part, which is the whole governance in terms of how do you baseline, set up some of these controls early is important, right? Because then the tool is just an enabler. It just helps you to do things faster.
It's the people who's going to use it.
Exactly. Great. So Abhinavji, I mean to you, right? So what would be your advice, right, for organizations, let's say, who are yet to take this journey, right, to a well-defined and a robust a cloud FinOps and a governance model? Maybe just 2-3 bullets that you want to just call out, that where do they start, what should you take care of? That would really help.
Yeah, I would say first start with an assessment. Just have a look on where are your spend going, and wherever it goes, does it have a value? And then a little bit on what are the wastages and where you see that something has been taken and not being utilized. That's obviously should be your approach. And then typically it breaks down into 2-3 parts. Obviously, as Phoebe also highlighted, you have to see the culture, how whether people are educated, whether even people should know where they can save cost. And then second, obviously establishing a process, and obviously if there is a centralized cloud team, or let's say if you have a guy who is looking over cloud security, or let's say somebody who already has a visibility of cloud, you can take feedback from that person. Establish a team where you see that somebody is monitoring and checking where is my money going, and then charge back and show back to people that this much is, and then establish a little bit of kitty based structure also, that this is my budget, this is what I have decided that how much I will spend, and then if I cross the threshold, some alarming, some communication goes to people. So that is for starters, I would say.
Great. So I think the key takeaway from that would be at least understand where you're spending today.
Correct.
Right. So that is very important. And then sort of set up alerts and alarms wherever necessary, just to make sure that you are within that threshold. That will allow you to make sure that, and I think that's a good point, right? Because once you spend money and then you realize, this was a spend, I think these alarms will actually help you understand that you can stop that spend happening, right? If you take, I think I take that insight. Thanks for that, Abhinavji. So Phoebe, back to you. Probably a curveball to you, right? And it's everybody's speaking about Gen AI today, right?
Mm.
And as you see, Gen AI is getting integrated almost in every use case. How do you think, probably if I were to do this early in the journey, where I say, hey, all of that is, I create models, AI models, which can manage this whole cost for me. Do you think it will disrupt this whole? And because you come from a product company, do you think
Mm.
it's going to be a hard life for the products, FinOps products going forward?
All right, I will try to take it in a different way. So I won't stop people or organization building their own model, because from the very beginning of the FinOps practice, there's always a debate on build versus buy. If you want to build everything from scratch, I mean, there's nothing to stop you, but you gotta evaluate the ROI and whether you're doing the right thing, comparing to you just take the best, how good looks like from the market. So let's say if you want to go with the best practice or the best product in the market, our direction for now is that we are gonna coexist with Gen AI and to embed it into the product and the daily cloud operation. So let me give you examples. So everybody, I assume you have tried on ChatGPT, and you know it can write Python code for you. And do you want to really apply that Python code 100% without any amendment into your project? Not really, right? So what we can do is we can first thing train this Gen AI model into the FinOps product, so it does understand your requirement to visualize or present the data as you want, so you don't have to go through the learning curve of the BI knowledge, right? So that's number one. And number two is definitely on the more cross, like a technology crossroad space. We have plans to embed with the machine learning and the predictive model, so that it can generate more personal or more let's say specific forecast and budgeting model for you and advice, so that is still very personalized, and you don't have to, also you don't have to learn the Python code from the scratch. So this is our plan from the tool perspective, and I hope this is excited you, and you will. I personally have confidence that this kind of new feature with the Gen AI will bring more people from the organization into the FinOps circle, so that they are getting more comfortable to use the tool and benefit from the tool, and without worrying about, I'm not that tech savvy, I'm not a cloud person. These are not the problem at all, because the entire objective of FinOps is to bring people together and to maximize the value.
Absolutely. I think, Phoebe, I think thanks for that. That was a very good insight. I think that's the time that we essentially had for this panel. So once again, I mean, very interesting thoughts, right? So learning from both of your experience and a very diverse perspective, right? One coming from the industry and one from the product side. I think very interesting. I mean, probably I would love to discuss more with you. I think probably we'll again connect more to sort of take some of your perspectives more. But I think now we're done at least for the panel round. So once again, Abhinav, Phoebe, thank you so much for your time and those questions. Probably, I think we might have some Q&A. Let's see how the Q&A window is. If there's any questions, probably we'll get to you. So with that, everyone, I mean, at least end of the panel, we'll sort of continue with the other sessions of the webinar. We almost sort of reached to the end, right? To the end of the session. So essentially, if you look at the key takeaways from from all the the content that we went through before, we believe embedding FinOps at every stage of the cloud journey is going to be critical, right? And I think it was Phoebe who made that call, right? It is not a once in a month or a once in a year kind of an activity. It needs to be continuously validated, right? So it needs time and dedication, because you're talking about dollars which will essentially go down the drain. Leverage your FinOps tools, right? So no matter what tool you get into, but use that tool not just as a tool to report to you where do you optimize your cost, but use that and see how you can actually build that into more cost governance platforms. Can you create platforms which can monitor, take actions, report, so that it is not just a reporting system, but it also, as to Abhinavji's point, how can it actually send alarms, notifications, and also maybe take some actions, right? And once you have that, invest into automation, right? Invest into automation where you can improve on productivity, compliance, and security while keeping cost low, because there are many of these activities which are done manually, takes time, and cloud, the way it is, I think all of you, I mean, all the participants would know, right? Cloud, a wrong service selection or something that you do by mistake, there are many instances, right, can give you a huge bill end of the month, right? So how do you actually automate some of these with those guardrails and policies to ensure that you meet the requirement while you keep the cost low? And last but not the least, measure your cloud success by the value it has created for the business, right? It is not about how much cost you reduced. It is not a apple to apple where I say, "Hey, earlier I was spending 100, now I'm spending 120, so my cloud cost has gone up." No. See whether the 20 rupees that you made, was there a value, business value made? It can be maybe a better per customer experience. It can be a reduced turnover time, your systems availability. Now that's how you actually measure your success. So these are, I think the key takeaways that we want to share before we sort of jump into the Q&A. But with that, participants, I think that's what we wanted to share for today. We'll now look at the questions and pose the questions. I think once we're done with the questions, we will then end the session. But so Vanshita, how do we look at the questions? Is there a...
So everyone who has any questions, please drop your questions in the Q&A box. We are happy to take that.
So what I'll do, Anshita, I'll end the PPT, and I'm assuming that then I might probably also have a view to the Q&A box.
Yeah.
Great. And pardon me, I know, I mean, it's been, at least for me, it's a mix of many collaboration tools. So I'm just trying to figure out where the Q&A is when in a webinar, and I do get it now. Yep. I think Vanshita, I think Ashutosh says that it's inactive. Ashutosh, sorry, we couldn't get the question. Do you have a challenge in putting down your query? Well, no, no response.
I do not see Ashutosh in the.
I see
Still not on the
Ashutosh Bhaskar. I see it says it's inactive.
It was probably at the start of the session, Prasad.
Okay, right. But are there any questions? I mean, I think participants, we have 10 more minutes. This is essentially for a Q&A. So do drop, right? You don't have to worry. Just do drop your thoughts, queries, or if you need any clarification. Vanshita, what we'll do, maybe we'll give maybe 5 more minutes for any questions. If not, then probably I think time well spent.
Yes. So we have a question from Swapnil Dubey. How do we measure the ROI of the FinOps tool?
ROI of the FinOps tool. I think before I probably I'll also lean on Shanmuka and Phoebe to maybe answer parts of it. But in my view, sorry, I don't know who was the question. Swapnil, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think Swapnil, I mean, probably it would be wrong to actually look at ROI of a FinOps tool, right? Because the ROI would be in terms of the data or the findings which come out of the FinOps tool, how well you basically act on it, right, is what will actually give you the ROI, right? So if you see, end of the day, let's say tomorrow, if I were to have something, let's say if I were to have a smartphone with all the latest features, but if I use it only for, let's say, just calling and not using other features, then if you say, I just stick to a mobile phone, right? So that's my view. But I mean, Shanmuka or Phoebe or Abhinavji, if you have a second thought, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll go first, and then probably then Phoebe, you can chime in. Right. So the way I look at it is, it essentially goes back to what is the potential of cost savings that we can drive out of the current consumption, right? I mean, if I were to look at multiple different varied clients that we operate on, someone is consuming like 10K USD dollars per month is their current consumption, right? And if they want to do some more optimization on that $10,000 of consumption and trying to bring in a FinOps tool into the environment in order to manage and monitor, we need to look at, hey, what is the potential for saving, and what is the cost that we are going to incur in deploying the FinOps tool and then managing the FinOps tool and drive cost optimization for the 10K consumption, right? So we may have to just do a quick dip check, right, as to, hey, what is the potential that exists in the consumption pattern, right? If we start to see that, hey, our consumption is based on low utilized VMs or databases, and there's enough potential for us to reduce the cost by using FinOps tools capabilities and recommendations, yet then the cost of deploying and procuring a FinOps license tool will be paying off depending on the potential saving that exists. But if consider large organizations like Adani and others, there's a different value for, in my mind, will be value to bring in FinOps tools, because of the large estate and the number of resources that need to be looked at. FinOps tool brings the features and capability set in order to fast track the optimization. So that's where I look at, like, hey, look at the size of the organization. What is the current consumption today? What's the potential of saving based on a dipstick analysis of the current consumption? Also look for what is the cost that you are going to incur. I mean, because many of the cloud service providers also provide some inbuilt tooling in order to do some financial analysis on the cost consumption. You may have to just validate all of that and then do a ROI. At the end of the day, ROI is what is the saving that you would achieve on the cloud consumption, and that's how I look at it. But Phoebe and Abhinav, please add on from your perspective and your experiences.
I just echo Shamukha's point that there are two ways to look at the ROI. The first one is more tangible. For example, the cost of you saved versus the cost before and the cost after, right? The intangible part is more on the visibility side. Like more people get visibility, less time spent on showback and chargeback data, say massaging on the data. And of course, the cultural side, how do you build this kind of FinOps practice and the ownership from the non-IT department who used to think the cloud is solely and the IT liability.
Yeah. So yeah, I also concur over here that and I would write the same thing which Prasad also said in the past, that it also depends upon how fast and how quick and how agile you are on the recommendations which has been given by the tool. So obviously, tool will give you a show back, charge back, and then it can give you a pattern on where you are overspending. Either you're not right sizing, or let's say you have idle resources getting wasted. So understanding the patterns, and then obviously, as Phoebe said, that a bit of actions on the side on the culture, and then how you optimize it out. It all depends upon how you convey, how you collaborate with people, and then the similar findings which you see people learn people learn with the lessons what they see, and then they do not repeat the same mistakes. That's how it helps everybody.
Thanks for that. Any other? Do we have any more query? Achita, any more questions?
Yeah, Prasad, we have one question. What are the most common blind spots that lead to hidden cloud cost leaks, and how they can be proactively identified?
Common blind
If
spot.
you take this question, the blind spots and the, let's say the missing, the white space, right? So I'll say the obvious part will be the orphaned resource, which means the resource is not utilized. The thing 100% is idle, and it could be even worse that it doesn't really tag with anything. So if you try to draw a report with say cost by application, cost by project, cost by environment, this resource does not show on any of these reports. But you still, at the end of the month, you will find there are a few hundred or few thousands of from the bill that you cannot really justify. So it could come from this kind of orphaned or alien resources as we call it in the FinOps world. Another way things is let's say one-time cost. So this is really this could happen in a really in an anomaly way that some people maybe configure the resource wrong, or if there is an unauthorized access, or somebody just hit the wrong button. Okay, so in this case, the cost will look completely normal at the beginning of the month, but it will change dramatically over the rest of the month between day one and the day you get the bill. Okay, and if you come without the FinOps tool, and it's unfortunately happened within the cloud alert guardrail, right? It will not really say generate any alert, but you only show up by the end of the month. So give an example. If your guardrail of AWS is, let's say, $5,000, and there is a resource that usually runs under the $1,000 mark, and for certain reason, it raised up to 4,000 for this month. Nothing will be triggered because it's still under the guardrail, right? But you only know that by the end of the month. All right, so this is another way of unusual cost or blind spot economist. And I would like to add one more case is that the legacy resource. So it happens in the early adapter with the cloud. So let's say if you spin up a resource 5 years ago, and there are only say 5 options in the market to fit your needs, and you spin it up, you run it, everything goes well, they just never touch it. And when time goes by, there are new options in the market that actually can bring down your cost by say 20%. What you're gonna do is basically just switch the resource type. But because you don't have the time or bandwidth, it's not realistic to go through every single line of your resource list. It's always been missed out, right? So this is like the potential waste that you could occur without an automated tool to give you all these actionable recommendations.
Yep.
Thanks, PB. I just want to add one more example that we typically see in many organizations, right? This probably is definitely not coming in from any tooling reports or any reports as well. Like, for example, you've approved a project for doing a POC, and you assume the POC will be running for a duration of 3 months. But you start to realize that the consumption is as per the existing policies of utilization being around about 85%, and the resources are being consumed as expected. But the POC might have actually closed out 2 months of the 3-month program, but you are seeing that the resources are being either consumed more than 3 months or 5 months and 6 months. No one actually acted upon to shut down those resources or shut down those POC projects, right? It might be not just the POC projects, but also dev test environments where they spin up and then probably plan to use it, but they are not using because of the development cycles and the testing cycles have been either cut short or not even used for the purpose and so on. So there's a lot of blind spots that are more related to the governance controls as to from a pure program management, and closure of the programs and projects that are consuming cloud resources. That's one big area that I see consistently across multiple clients.
Great, great. Thanks, Phoebe and Shanmuka. I know there are a couple more questions, but we are sort of already out of time. We are 2 minutes beyond time. So I'm sorry, we won't be able to take all the queries for now. But just maybe Phoebe, Abhinavji, if you are all okay, we'll just take one more question and then we will sort of end the session. Right. So Vanshita, one more question if we can take,
Yeah.
and we'll sort of quickly wrap up.
So we have a question for companies starting their FinOps journey. What are the most critical early steps to take to build sustainable cost governance?
Abhinavji, you might want to come here, but I think this is where Abhinav had actually shared that, right? What steps companies need to take at the start. And I think it's a mix of both governance plus as well as, the whole monitoring piece. But Abhinavji, maybe that will be your area of expertise. What should companies do to be successful?
Sure. So first of all, you need to have a visibility on the cost. You see where your cost is going. So you need to see what are the IT projects which you have and what is their duration and how much is the capacity which is being utilized, and then how much is reserved. And then of course, first you establish visibility, then it might by itself you will start to come to know that where are the loopholes. And then I think there are multiple measures which you can take. Either you can, somewhere you can take commitments, somewhere you can, do scheduling, where you see that most of my resources are utilized in a day and I can switch it off at night. Or you can go with another model where you say you have to do right sizing. So once you have that, once you just have a look on what and where, what is the nature of spend and what is the nature of product and projects you have, by itself ideas will come to.
And to add to that, I think while that is the you need to do, the very important thing is you need to set up a framework essentially of people with the clear roles and responsibilities.
Correct.
That is a very important thing to do, because while you might look at the technology side, but there's only enough a technology can do, right? Because on the cloud you cannot do a lot of right sizing, and there's a limit to that. But I think going back to see, hey, where are you spending that money? Was that project important? As Shanmuga mentioned, right? You set up a POC, it is running for 6 months. What is the purpose of those POC? I think those are some of those hard decisions that needs to be called. And the early you set up that FinOps framework, which is identifying the stakeholders, clear roles and responsibilities, how this council would come together on a scheduled basis and monitor the cloud spend, I think that is what is required. Right? That would be actually very essential. And all of this we are talking about is not to say this is actually a high-end activity or it will take ages to do these, right? These are actually just people coming together, collaborating, looking at it, and then taking a decision, right? It's as going to be as simple as that.
Correct.
But hey, I think great questions. It was a very great discussion. I thank all the participants, who had joined us for this webinar. Thank you to our panelists, Shanmuka, Abhinav, Phoebe. Thanks a lot for participating. And Vanshita, thank you for all the coordination. Ritvik, once again, thanks for supporting me in doing this entire FinOps thingy. But great discussion, and thank you everyone, and a good evening to all of you.
Thank you, Prasad and Protiviti.